My name is Dan Russell-Pinson, and I'm a video game maker. This is my 6th AppCamp, and I have the hoodies to prove it. So I'll give you a little bit about my background. This is my first computer, which is a TRS-80 Model 1. Anybody want to guess how much memory it had?
4?
That's right, 4 kilobytes. So to put that into perspective, the Apple Watch has 512 megabytes of memory, which means that the Apple Watch has 128,000 times the memory of my first computer, and you can wear it on your watch. So that's just how far we've come in my lifetime. This is the first thing you saw when you turned on these old computers. It just says ready, and its little cursor flashes. And the important thing to note here is that to make these computers do anything that you wanted, you pretty much had to learn how to program. So one of the first commands I learned on the TRS-80 was the set command. So this is a command that turns on a pixel at a certain X and Y coordinate that you specify. So the first thing I wanted to do was make it draw a Pac-Man maze, because Pac-Man. So how do you suppose I did that? Well, I did it with a lot of set commands. And, but I pretty much ran out of memory before I could finish the maze. So that's how I learned about a what? For next loop. So with just 3 lines of code, I was able to replace hundreds of set commands. And it's through trial and error and solving problems like this that I learned how to program. And when I wasn't learning how to program, I was playing lots and lots and lots of games. And after a while, I noticed that the games I enjoyed were all created by, generally speaking, a single person. And it made me think that I could do this. And I would say these 4 words a lot during my career. So I started making my own video games. I programmed the first ones in basic language. They were way too slow. So I learned assembly language to make them run faster. So they weren't the greatest games in the world, but I was very proud of them, and I still am. So I learned a lot about programming during this time, but I also learned even some more important lessons of just the process and the challenge of creating something. So fast forward to 1991, I just graduated from college. I started out as a computer consultant for banks. And my first assignment was writing assembly language code on the mainframe that controlled the operation of these large check sorting machines.
Oh, gosh.
So that was sexy, really sexy. So as soon as I was introduced to the real world, I realized I didn't want anything to do with it. So I made it my goal to get out of there as soon as possible and to kind of forge my own path. So my first attempt was when I hit view source on my Netscape browser and I saw HTML for the first time. And I thought, I could do this. So I started making my own website. I bought Photoshop and tried to learn everything I could about how to make graphics. So I quit my job and I started the company that I still run today. And I wanted to become a web designer. That wasn't very original, I realized, and lots of people had the same idea and failed, like I did. So after about a year, I had to go back to work at my old company. But this time as a contractor, so it was a little bit better. Then I found something called affiliate marketing. If you don't know what that is, I was basically building my own websites that promoted other companies' products, and I would get paid a commission on each sale. So at my peak, I was actually maintaining 250 websites that I had built. It wasn't really fulfilling work, but it was enough so I could quit my job. So in 2000 I quit, and I had never worked 9 to 5 again. So during this time I was playing a lot of Flash games, and I kind of had a deja vu. Just like in the early 80s, all the games I was playing were written by a single person, which made me all the more want to make games again. So this time more seriously. So 2007, 2008, I started making my own Flash games. And not much money in free games, but it was a good experience. In 2009, I started porting my games to iPhone, and still not much money there. In 2010, the recession really started hitting me hard, My affiliate income had pretty much dried up, and my game sales really weren't existent. So I thought my good run was over. But a few good things happened. A company approached me to purchase one of my games outright, and I got enough funds to make ends meet for a few more months. And during this time, I met a guy named Alan Tortolani, who basically contracted me to program one of his educational apps. So we made this app called napkingo, and as soon as it was released, it went to #1, and it was very exciting. So that was the closest thing I'd had to success at that time, but it wasn't my app. But I went on to make more apps for him, and I decided I would make my own educational app. So that's when I made Stack the States. And so that was my first, I guess, success on the App Store. And I went on to make several more educational games. And my latest is game number 12, which is Stack the States 2. So as Warren alluded to, it received an unexpected endorsement recently. So if you don't know who Ted Cruz is, he was a Republican presidential candidate. And so this is a little clip from CNN's Ted Cruz.
It must be fun. I mean, having them, as you said earlier, I mean, it's got to be an amazing educational experience to have them out on the campaign trail.
Well, they've learned a lot. They have a game on their iPads that I would recommend to all parents called Stack the States.
I've completed it in less than a month. You have to earn.
How does it work? What do you have to do?
So amazingly, she goes on for a full minute describing how to play Stack the States on national TV, which was really surreal. So my friends were on my Facebook page like saying, "Did you know that they're talking about that?" So you could say I have some ideological differences with her father, but I felt like she was a very good spokesperson for my game. Okay, so being an independent developer, I spend practically all my time in the trenches, and I very rarely take time to pause and reflect on the big picture. So putting this talk together kind of gave me an excuse to take a step back and to kind of think about what I do at a higher level. And I've broken it down into 3 sections. This is what I say when the doorbell rings, by the way, too. But who are you, what do you want, and what are you doing? So keep in mind, this all comes from the point of view of an independent developer. And I'm going to be talking about games, so because that's what I do. But everything should apply to other things like apps and play experiences and so on. So who are you? Here I'm thinking about the kind of the personal traits that affect a person's ability to create. Like for instance, do you need to be an optimist? Well, let's find out. So if you could get your laser pointers out, and let us know if you see yourself as an optimist or a pessimist. I kind of have a working theory of how this is going to...
Wait, aren't we self-selecting?
That's the point. Okay, this pretty much corresponds with what I would have guessed. Don't you have to be an optimist to be in this market? I mean, yeah, okay. So, speaking of optimism, one of my favorite thinkers and fellow optimists is the theoretical physicist David Deutsch. And so I'd like to start with a quote from him. So he says that everything that's not forbidden by laws of nature is achievable given the right knowledge. So let that sink in for a minute. So basically saying, as long as it doesn't violate a law of nature, anything is achievable, and the only thing keeping us from achieving it is not having the right knowledge. So given this, his definition of optimism shouldn't be a surprise. So he says optimism is the theory that all failures are due to insufficient knowledge. So I like this idea because it's not telling us, don't worry, everything's going to work out fine. Because if that's the case, then why should we work hard to do anything? Instead, he's saying that our problems can be solved by something that's within our control, which is obtaining knowledge. So it's optimistic, but it's telling us that we have to work hard to get that knowledge. So one more quote from him. I'm not going to cite his whole book. But the limiting factor in understanding anything is how interested you are. So, I think we could replace interested with enthusiastic or motivated or passionate and so on. So you may not get where you want to go right away. So it's important that you have passion to get you where you want to go. And along the way, I think it's important to appreciate and be enthusiastic about the milestones that you hit along the way. So, for instance, like in the early 80s, like just achieving this color rotation effect on the Atari 800, like that was awesome. And as geeky as it is, like learning how to create a drop shadow in Photoshop 3.0, that was exciting to me.
Yeah.
Okay, call me a geek. Okay. Creating my first website, learning how to design and render 3D images on my computer, and like seeing my game Block Drop on the iPhone for the first time. Like, I just could not wait to show people. They weren't really that interested, but I was, and that's the important thing. Recently creating these 3D state elevation models for Static States 2, using nothing but code. So it's being excited by these kind of milestones that makes me want to, achieve more. And this is why I think, like, outside motivators just can't be enough, because, like money and recognition, because by themselves, I don't think they'll see you through the long path to creative success. So to put it simply, enthusiasm plus knowledge equals success. And this in a nutshell is what my talk is about. And you could argue it's kind of what life's about, because if you can find something you're enthusiastic about, and if you're constantly learning something new, I think you're winning in life. Amen. So, do you need to be an introvert? I don't know. I think about this all the time. I have nothing to add, but I'm thinking aloud. But if you could share with us, do you see yourself as an introvert or an extrovert?
The introverts act responsibly.
If you're an introvert, stand up and say, "Look at me." Okay. Looks like an even mix here. This is interesting. Maybe a few more introverts. Maybe people are in the middle.
Extrovert with introvert tendencies.
Well, sometimes when I'm working really long after a long day, like alone at my computer, I think what I do must drive an extrovert like insane. Extroverts who like start conversations on purpose and who make eye contact. Like, how do they put in the long hours it takes to finish a creative project? I don't know. Maybe somebody can inform me.
Work with an introvert.
With the introverts at the ship. So another trait I think is important is developing what I would call a dynamic mindset. So, for instance, a static mindset would say that some people are born with certain abilities and some aren't. Okay? Whereas a dynamic mindset would say, you can become proficient in any skill with the right knowledge and practice. A static mindset is terrified of failure. Okay? But a dynamic mindset sees it as an opportunity, a way to learn and to get better. And the biggest canard for me is that some people are creative and some people aren't, which I think anybody can become creative, and I'm living proof of that. But of course you have to put in the hard work, and you have to be willing to put up with a lot of initial failures. A lot. So another important trait, maybe one of the most important traits you can have, is taste. Without taste, it's very hard for you to judge the quality of your own work. So some of you might know Ira Glass from NPR. He has some great thoughts on taste. If you haven't seen his video, I would urge you to Google Ira Glass on storytelling and watch it. Just not right now. So he basically says it's your taste that led you into the creative process in the first place. But it's also your taste that constantly reminds you that your work is not as good as you want it to be. And for a lot of people, this causes them to quit their creative pursuits before they get anywhere. But he reminds us that everybody goes through this, and the way to catch up to your taste or to to close the gap is to create a body of work. So it's ironic that taste can both push you forward to success and make you want to quit. Which reminds me of this Henry Ford quote. If you think you can do a thing, or you think you can't do a thing, you're right. So maybe things are more in our control than we think. So just like taste, intuition is very important. Creating a finished game or running a business requires like 1,000 decisions, and sometimes you're really only left with your intuition. So for example, like in 2010 when the iPad came out, a lot of us were deciding, should we create a universal app or should we create 2 separate apps for iPhone and iPad? So my intuition told me to release my apps as universal apps. And I think in hindsight, that saved me a lot of headaches. And my intuition also told me to keep my apps priced at 99 cents for the first 3 or 4 years. In hindsight, I actually do not know if that was the right decision or not, but I stuck with my intuition. And in the early days, I put ads in my educational games, the free versions. And in hindsight, yes, that was the wrong decision to do. So that's an example of my intuition misfiring. But we correct. But there are many more examples, but I think they all have the same lesson, which is to err on the side of what's best for the customer. I add an asterisk because you might conclude by this that we should make our apps free because that would be better for the customer, right? No, because if we make apps free, we can't make a living and we can't make the apps customers love. So with that understanding, we'll get rid of the asterisk. And along those lines, like recently I created Stack of States 2 and released it as a separate app instead of updating the original. And also recently I've updated all of my educational apps to $1.99 or $2.99, depending. I feel like if a customer doesn't think my app's worth $2, then at this point I don't want them as a customer. But if they do, I want to give them their money's worth. So what do you want and how do you get it? I'm not really big on setting goals. That sounds like a slacker, but when I do set goals, I want them to be as specific as possible. So generic goals or general goals, they have the problem of not being very actionable, they're easy to put off, and sometimes they're just plain overwhelming. And they also require you to kind of predict the future as to what you might want at some future date and what options might be available to you. So, I don't know, my style is just to kind of dive headfirst into ideas and projects that interest me, and because I learn by doing things. And that's important because new knowledge comes from solving problems. So to me, the best way to progress is to roll up your sleeves, dive in, and find some problems. So you might know Scott Adams as the creator of Dilbert. He is in favor of following systems instead of goals. So he says that the problem with goals is that they focus on the destination. Hang on. Yeah. So the problem with goals is that they lock you into a mental model that can make you too rigid. And so instead he suggests a systems approach. So unlike a goal that focuses on a destination, systems are more a way of life that entail constant learning and growing. So a systems approach implores you to constantly improve your skills, pay attention to where you are and what options are available to you at any given moment, and to think yourself to the next level. So basically systems focuses on the journey and not the destination. And this is basically my story with educational apps. I got here through a very circuitous route, and it's one that I never could have planned on ahead of time. It's just by constantly improving my skills, seeing where I am, and seeing what options are available to me. Okay, fail fast, fail often. So this is one of the most well-known cliches in business and startup culture. It always sounds so negative to me, though. But my response is you can't fail if you don't finish. So when young game designers ask me for advice, one of my main tips is that you just have to finish something. So I prefer finish fast, finish often. That sounds a little better, right? So you learn a lot when you transform an initial idea into a finished project or product. And with a finished product, of course, you can share that with the world and then start getting customer feedback. And that's when you really start to learn about what your game or product is all about. And once you release your game into the world, you have to, be honest about whether your game resonates with your players or not. And if you determine it does not, then sometimes the best thing you can do is just take the lessons you learned and apply them to the next project. Another mistake I see young developers make is they take on projects with too big a scope. So this is, I guess, self-explanatory, but if you want to finish fast, you need to pick projects with a smaller scope. And finish inexpensively. The great thing about apps is that they're pretty much completely virtual. So especially if you're just starting out, you shouldn't be spending a lot of money to make your product. And whether you're doing it all yourself, or maybe you're a programmer who's teaming up with a designer, you want to keep your expenses low. That kind of brings me to the next topic, which is the advantages of being an independent developer. So independent developers can do things that big companies can't. So you should take advantage of it. So indies can make games that are innovative, quirky, edgy. Maybe for kids apps, you don't want to make them too risky, but you get the point. And don't try to beat the big companies at their own game. Play a different game. So another thing independents can do is they can connect with customers. And I've noticed that customers really like it when they receive an email from the actual developer of the game. And it's a great way to disarm an angry customer. And it's important to, I think, respond to anybody who takes the time to write to you and to really listen to their feedback. Because that's the best way you can learn about what your customers like and don't like about your games. So, for instance, the first version of Stack of States just had this static map that gave you an indication of what states you've earned. And I received a lot of emails from parents saying that their kids would tap on the states, expecting them to do something, and then were disappointed when nothing happened. So I updated the app so that when you tap on a state, it zooms up and it starts giving you, facts and figures about the state. And now, in Stack of States 2, it's evolved into kind of a living, breathing, full-fledged map in 3D. And when you tap on a state, you can see the cities and landmarks, and you can even see like a 3D elevation of the state. So let your customers help you to make your games better. Speaking of connecting with customers, I can tell you a little story about July 4th, 2012. On this day, all apps that were released and app updates that were released by Apple were corrupted. So when a customer tried to bring up your app, they would just see a black screen and then it would crash. Unfortunately, Stack of States, an update was released that day for it. So within the hour of it going live, I received tons of emails from customers. I couldn't print some of them, but this is a short sample. So after panicking for like an hour or something, I just developed my game plan, which is I wrote every customer back. I offered them a promo code to one of my other apps, and just for their trouble. And that generated just hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of emails back and forth over the 2 or 3 days that it took to get this fixed. And but the response was pretty amazing. I had happy customers that felt special, positive reviews, great word of mouth. One of the customers was a radio DJ, and he was so happy with the way I handled his situation that he brought me on the air and interviewed me. So, what could have been a disaster turned out to be actually a big positive for me. So, who knew? So what are you doing? Here I want to talk about the actual products that we make. I don't know how else to say this, but for me, it's just all about making a great game. This might sound obvious, but when you look at the App Store, let's just say there are other motives at work. So I would just say, sweat the details, take the time to do it right, don't take shortcuts, don't ever say it's good enough. And sometimes I think that developers spend a bit too much time worrying about things like search engine optimization and getting featured and choosing the right keywords and so on. Again, it's all about making a great game. These things are important, but they're not going to create success for you. I think it's better to think of them as some kind of multiplier. So they can help a great game get noticed, but they can't make the game great. The game idea must match my skills. So I think it's important for everybody to understand what their strengths are and choose their projects based on that. Like personally, I'm a programmer first and foremost. I think I make decent graphics. I don't know anything about UI, and overall design is kind of a weakness for me. But if you look at my portfolio, I think you'll see that I make games that play to my strengths. Quick tip. Oops. Oh, that's doubling that. So always set your goals higher than you think you can achieve. Your product is inevitably going to be limited by something, either your own skills or time constraints or technical issues. So always shoot a little bit higher than you want to achieve. The game must be fun for me to play. That sounds kind of obvious, but I design games for kids who are 1/4 of my age. But it still has to be fun for me to play. If it's not, then I'm just guessing at what kids like, and I don't think that's the way to go. Also, if the game isn't fun for me to play, it's going to be hard for me to put in the months of work it takes to actually create it. And this is why I make games for older kids. Another advantage that if I make a game that's fun for myself, then that increases the odds of it being fun for other adults. And that's good because it's adults who are buying the game and are in a position to tell other potential buyers about your game. So for me, a good game creates the situation or the sense that anything can happen. So I think it's important to make your game open and dynamic enough so that special moments can happen, even ones that you as a developer might never have thought of. So when people think about your game, you want them to say things like, remember that time when we strapped 40 rockets onto a car and it flew into space? Or, balanced Texas on top of the Florida Panhandle? Or created a roller coaster with a 1-mile drop into the ocean? So it's moments like these that help players connect with your game. And it's the anticipation of future moments that make them want to play again. So this is more of a practical one, but the game needs to have a reasonable path to success. Again, if I'm going to spend months of my life making it, I want to feel like there is a path to success. So I'm going to ask questions like, is there a need for this app? Is there a defined audience for this app, and is it big enough to support it? Does the game, fulfill a need that's not currently satisfied or not satisfied well? And I think this is probably the most important tip. I think every game needs to have something, that is unique about it. I'm not saying that everything you create has to be completely revolutionary, but I think it should have something that the market hasn't seen before. To the extent that you think video games are art, which I do, as an artist you should always be shooting to say something new and to push the medium forward. And you also want your game to be unique for marketing reasons too. So when you finish the game and it's time to tell the world about it, having these unique features will make it so much easier for you to create your elevator pitch and to get people interested in the game. So for instance, like in monster physics, you can create these crazy contraptions, but what makes it unique is that the player can actually operate them by tapping the wheels to make them turn, or tapping the engines or rockets to make them engage. So your creations actually come to life. Off the Rails has a unique gameplay mechanic where you can actually design a roller coaster while you're riding it by tilting the device, so you can dive and lift and turn. So as far as I know, there's nothing like this on the App Store. Stack of States, I think, has several unique features, especially for its time. I think just being a fully realized video game with a physics engine made it stand out back in 2010. And it also has a game mechanic that lets players manipulate the states like they're physical objects, so they get to know their shape and relative size. And I know people want to hear about promotion, but I don't really have much to say about it, other than experimenting with the odd Facebook post, boosted Facebook post, or I really haven't spent much money on advertising. I haven't paid for an expedited review. The only thing I really do is I cross-promote my apps within my other apps. But I couldn't always do that either. So I think as an independent developer, the best marketing you can have is word of mouth. So just like an internet meme gets shared around Facebook, you want your app to get talked about. So what is it that's going to inspire people to talk about your app? And as I say here, see previous slides. I think it's just by, make a game that creates special moments and that has unique game mechanics, or make a game that lets players create things and share them. Think about special touches you can add, like characters or, achievements, humor, really anything. So we've talked about how everything that's not forbidden by laws of nature are achievable given the right knowledge, and how we can take that knowledge and combine it with enthusiasm to lead to success. And I hope that after thinking about these ideas, maybe in the back of your mind, there'll be these words that maybe I can do more than I think I can. And I wanted to close with a story that kind of exemplifies some of the things I just talked about. So I've always been fascinated by art and painting in particular. I've tried it different times and I've failed, and I quit. And I concluded that some people are painters and some people aren't. Does that sound familiar? But then, at the end of last year, I saw this documentary called Tim's Vermeer. Has anybody seen this movie? Okay, good. So in the documentary, Tim, he kind of theorizes that the artist Vermeer might have achieved the photorealistic look of his paintings by using technology, like a camera obscura or some contraption made with mirrors and lenses and so on. And in one scene, Tim uses this special painting technique using a small mirror that's placed at a 45-degree angle. And he's able to basically render a photograph with oil paint, even though he has no painting skills. And I saw this and I thought, wow, maybe I could do this. And maybe I could use this technique to learn how to paint like I've always wanted to. Unfortunately, at the time, I was working on Stack of States 2, and I just didn't really feel like I could start something new. So instead, what I did is I just started taking breaks throughout the day, and I watched painting videos on YouTube. And when I say watch painting videos, I mean I watched hours and hours and days of painting videos. And I just tried to soak up as much knowledge as I could, like color theory and brush techniques and everything. And this was kind of like my escapism from the drudgery of making apps. No, it's all fun, right? No. But after I finished the game, I rushed to the art store and I bought the basic art supplies. And the mirror and the other apparatus that I ordered, it wouldn't arrive for another week or two. So I thought I'd just get my feet wet and learn how to put paint on canvas, and then I'd be ready to paint for real when the equipment arrived. But to my astonishment, I was actually able to paint without the mirror technique. And I literally only had my enthusiasm and the knowledge that I picked up from the YouTube videos. And I was able to create something that I was proud of. And of course, I'm not making masterpieces here. And to get better, I have a long road to travel. But until this experience, I didn't even know that I had a road to travel down. So it's ironic that it was only the promise of this special technique and this equipment that made me even want to try to paint again. And it turns out I didn't really need it after all. So all I needed was my enthusiasm and a little bit of knowledge. So thank you for listening.